All right, welcome back. Time now for the paper review right here on Daybreak on this 8th day of August 2019. And as always, you can weigh in on some of the discussions we'll be having. 2242 is our SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. Now, our big discussion this morning is on death, inheritance, and wills. Do you have a will? Have you written a will? Have you been thinking about writing a will for the last couple of years but still haven't gotten around to doing it? Tell us, let us know, and we'll be having that discussion with our panel shortly. But before that, you want to introduce them?
Yes, let's start with the introduction. I was wondering what you were posing. But let's see. Okay, so I'll start with introducing them from my immediate left. Thank you so much for coming in. Titus Maina, think tank analyst, Kenya Business Guide. Asante sana for coming in. We have Steve Ogola, who's also a lawyer. Asante for coming in. And Wanjeri Nderu, human rights activist. I wouldn't say what you said earlier on, but yeah, human rights activist. Thanks for coming in. And John Ribia, an expert in family law. Asante sana. We'd like to find out from you, at what point do you write a will, what do you include, and should you include children out of wedlock, and doesn't that then just blow up everything? Because the moment your wife sees you writing someone's name, then they're like, and who's this? So will that...
There was a Twitter poll.
Yeah.
Declare or wait till the funeral. 50% said,
wait,
Katambe funeral. So we're laughing now, but it's a very serious matter. But before we get to that, we think it's important we tell you a little bit about what's happening in the papers, and we did this a bit earlier on. On the front page of the Daily Nation, briefly, why boarding school is becoming a bad idea. Find that story on page 10. MPs threaten war in dispute with Somalia. That is on page 8. Meanwhile, Kimwarer Dam not approved by the cabinet. You'll find that full story on the back page of the Daily Nation. But the one I want to just get the thoughts of my panel here about is the main story. 1998 bomb survivors to miss 430 billion payout. Now, you know that Kenyans bore the brunt of these twin attacks. The majority of the 224 people that were killed died in Nairobi, and they were not connected to the embassies or to contractors. Most of the 214 persons killed were passerbys or were working in nearby buildings, as were several hundred Kenyans who suffered injuries, some grievous, when the bombs exploded. And of course, there's a picture there of a Faith Mutinda paying tribute to her father, Daniel Mutinda, at the Bomb Blast Memorial Park in Nairobi yesterday, after 21 years have passed since that incident. You can get more details on page 5 as well. Let me just get some quick thoughts of my panelists here in studio, and maybe Titus, I'll start with you. Just your thoughts about this. In many ways, I can imagine the average Kenyan picking up a paper today and thinking, how unfair is this? What are your thoughts?
Mainly, the main issue you can see is the cover. So is it that the cover should cover also adjacent buildings in case of terrorist attacks? I think that's now the question that we should start asking ourselves.
Okay, so the cover.
Yeah. So if the cover doesn't go beyond, because mostly covers it will only cover the employees, regardless of the fact that there may be people who are passing by out there. So are they just going to be collateral damage?
That's why we need to review the cover so that it extends beyond, especially in cases of terrorism and any other.
Okay. Steve, what options do these people now have? Because there's also the issue of the cost of litigation. Not everyone else can take on such litigation process and even afford it, in as much as they can easily show that they were hurt in the process.
First of all, I'm aware there's a law firm which is compiling lists of people who lost their family members in this bomb blast but were not compensated. The US is right. You compensate people that were under your control. The state, the Kenyan government, ought to have compiled a list of families who lost their loved ones and those who were injured and compensated them. And there's a good case against, because see, part of the core duties of a government is to ensure that there's security. So if the investigation were completed and there was a lapse, you know, this is a terrorist incident and people have lost their lives, of course they are entitled to compensation by the government of Kenya. It is too ambitious to try and expand the scope of responsibility to cover passers-by, you know, especially if this incident is not relatable to the US Embassy, you know. So it's an incident that is totally related to the Kenyan government, their own security lapses. So there has always been two sets of category of persons who need to be compensated. Those who work for the US Embassy and the passers-by that are protected by the laws of Kenya and the government of Kenya. The government ought to have done something by now. If their government has not done, or the government is not willing to do so, well, there's a case for it. So if that firm has completed compilation of the names, they will institute legal proceedings, and I think they have a good case.
Yeah, but can you prove that there was a security lapse in the event that this was a terrorist attack?
You don't need to prove anything. You see,
that it was just a terrorist attack.
You know,
that the government was sleeping.
You don't even need to prove that there was a security. That's not your duty as a victim, or as a family member of a victim who was either injured or died in that blast. You know, the only bone of contention is that can you relate your injury? Can you relate the death of your loved one to that bombing? You know, because there are those cases that were documented, there are people who are not documented. Those cases that were not documented, I mean, there's going to be a huge challenge for them to relate their injuries or their deaths to their loved ones to that injury. But those that were documented surely have a case. It is for the government to explain what it does, what it tends to do, to make sure that people who lost their loved ones are compensated. People who got injured and are unable to, you know, reconstruct their lives, because many were not able to, were also equally compensated. And that, by the way, goes to all other victims of terrorist acts, like the Westgate, Garissa University, whatever. You know, I don't think government is paying detailed attention to the kind of suffering, you know, the consequence of terrorist attacks on individuals who are living their lives and who are paying taxes, expecting the state to give them protection, you know. So it's not safe to just say because terrorist is a global problem, once you suffer from a terrorist related, that's part of collateral injury or damage, just forget about it. That's not enough. There could be a serious case to answer for compensation on the part of the government, and I think if well argued, the government will certainly pay these people. They shouldn't give up, but they shouldn't bother the US. They should take up this matter with the Kenyan government. With the Kenyan government.
There's something interesting on the front, on page 5 of the Daily Nation related to that. US courts have already agreed that Sudan, and I think the Sudan issue came up because it's possible that that was either an entry route or the origins of some of the terrorists, is liable for a separate and additional 590 billion payout in compensatory damage payments to some of the Kenyans and Tanzanians harmed in the US embassy attacks. So that's something interesting there. Wanjiri, you worked in the insurance sector for a long time. Some would say that honestly there should be a way in which this insurance can reach out, can cover, you know, those who are affected even though they were not directly working for the US embassy as well. Your thoughts on this?
Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. What happens is the scope of the cover is what is adhered to. That is what they if I can say, obey. And what happens is the cover that only covered the US embassy employees can only, or people working within the US embassy buildings. That is how it works. It doesn't just come just because of terrorism or things like that, even accidents. You know, generally insurance companies not only protect themselves, but I'm not going to put it that they do not want to pay claims, but we need to be very careful even generally when we are taking insurance and ask ourselves, what is the scope of this cover that I have taken? So here we cannot blame the people who are you know, making some of these decisions, because that was their scope. But as Ogolla said, it is important that the Kenyan government takes up this issue, because the people who are away, majority of who died and were not within that scope, are not going to get any compensation. And yes, you can say this is a lot of money. It is a lot of money, 430 billion. But they will miss out on it because they were not on that list of people that are covered within that insurance scope. So it's just the rules of insurance. It's in the fine print.
So the issue of the listing, there's a difference between the insurance cover for the building and also the government's list, because the other question that Steve Ogolla was raising, that you need to be documented if you're hurt, but are these documents even kept properly? I mean, we're still struggling with our data analysis as up until now. If it was a piece of paper and then it was misplaced, so how can you even prove that I was actually there?
Of course, as you say, our data issues are another story entirely. But you will find also, unfortunately, Kenyans do not have, not just Kenyans, Africans in general, we do not have the habit of taking even things like life insurance seriously. So we live with God, and it is God's will, as we say. But a lot of these people, you will find, probably did not even have life cover. And they may have passed on, yes, on this day because of this very, you know, terrible incident. But everyday life, we don't cover ourselves. So if you're not employed by a company, or you don't have a cover that you have taken by yourself. If something happens to you, what happens to your family? We don't do that as Africans generally. It's not something that is...
Because we feel like it's premonition of death when you talk about it.
We are dancing with death if we
kind of
send those
which is pretty much our topic today. But John, what do you make of this situation? What are the options they have now?
From what I gather, the petitioners in this case were the employees of the embassy and the persons working in the building in Kenya and in Dar es Salaam, in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. Yeah. So in essence, the majority of the people who were injured did not come together and file a suit. So that's why you can see this payout has been given to these people. So all hope is not lost. Like Wakil Yogola said, they can still come up their own case and file it in the U.S. courts. The issue now will be the matter of costs, traveling there, lawyer fees, and all that. But all hope is not lost for the victims, and it's quite unfortunate that the majority of the people who were hurt actually missed out on the payments.
No.
Okay. All right.
There's still another story on the Standard page. Do you want to continue the Nation?
No, I think we're done with that.